and welcome to Care Partner Q&A Monday at the Inspired Memory Care Education, Training, and Resource Center at the 80th Street Residence. Hi, I'm Nettie Harper, and with me today is
Kelly Gilligan.
And Kelly is coming to you live from the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where our organization, Inspired Memory Care, collaborates with a vibrant community of individuals living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias and their care partners in care. We have both worked with individuals living with dementia in our personal and professional lives for over 20 years and have found our passion in the challenge, growth, and hope that can spring from the bonds we forge and maintain during the process of caring through cognitive change. It's been our experience that great care partners persevere through the struggles by having a team of like-minded individuals to be creative with and to lean on. We also know from experience that key education about cognitive change comes not only from research and experts, but from the people who are living with it.
So every week, we meet here at the 80th Street Residence with our team of professional and family care partners and with the folks who live here for focus groups, pilot testing, and feedback. They keep us grounded and let us know when we're on the right track or also the wrong track. It's our pleasure to present Care Partner Q&A Mondays as an initiative of the Training, Education, and Resource Center here at the 80th Street Residence. Please, if you have a topic you're interested in discussing with us or in learning more about, feel free to type it in the comments section of this chat or email us at info@inspiredmemorycare.com. Today's topic of conversation is, have they always been this way? Dementia and inhibitions.
Take it away, Nat.
Thanks, Kelly. Yes, let's talk about today, have they always been this way? And what exactly are inhibitions? Well, one of the most difficult challenges we've heard from care partners that we work with is when their loved one displays behavior that is out of their norm. Care partners have expressed embarrassment, shame, anger even. They've been apologetic and have gone as far as isolating themselves and their loved one from the world around them in order to protect their loved one as well as family and friends from the hurt that sometimes this displayed behavior may cause. Many have shared with us it's been difficult on how to respond in these situations when it arises, and they don't feel equipped to do so. So we felt very strongly this is a topic we should explore together today.
So what are inhibitions? A healthy brain has a function where it inhibits or stops certain behaviors or words from being done or said out loud, particularly in public. For example, you might be angry with your boss or think that he or she has a bad idea, but you're going to stop yourself most likely from saying all of the things that are on your mind because you're being smart about what the consequences of doing so might be. Okay, so you have an inhibition that is stopping you from saying every thought that enters your mind aloud. Similarly, if you're looking at something in a shop window and it's really appealing to you and you think to yourself, I'd really love that handbag or that pair of shoes, you don't just punch through the glass on the storefront to pluck the handbag or the pair of shoes from the window, because once again, you have that executive function to know if I follow this impulse, there will be consequences. So you have that foresight into possible outcomes. That's part of goal-directed behavior. And goal-directed behavior happens most frequently in the frontal lobe, which we'll talk about a little bit now. Dementia, including Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, tend to affect the frontal lobe. And that's the part of the brain that's responsible for regulating inhibitions and behavior, as well as the ability to control impulses. So whether I have a positive or a negative response to the stimuli around me in my environment. The decrease in inhibition develops, as mentioned, in frontotemporal dementia. It can develop with dementia with Lewy bodies. It can develop with Parkinsonism, Alzheimer's disease. So all of these different forms do have it as a feature.
You might also notice someone with dementia say unexpected things in response to something he or she sees or hears too. The person may seem mean or rude or even vulgar in his or her language. He or she might comment constantly on what is happening or who is in the environment. He or she might non-verbally make fun of people around by mocking them or even making negative facial expressions. This is not behavior he or she would normally have engaged in, but because the area of the brain that filters these reactions has been damaged, they are now happening publicly.
So Nettie just spoke about some of the spoken responses that might be commonly seen. There are also some distressing behaviors that might occur. So a person whose inhibitions have been damaged may equally, if they don't have the speech to express their dissatisfaction, or if they have limited speech, they may equally use a behavior or an action to communicate their dissatisfaction or communicate what they want. So for instance, some of the ones that we frequently encounter are responding physically to an unpleasant sensation. So it might be lashing out with the hands or grabbing somebody to try to get them to stop doing something that's causing them pain or causing them discomfort. Spitting, biting, removing clothing, and sometimes that is with the intention of self-display, and sometimes it has nothing to do with the intention to display oneself, and attempting to inappropriately touch someone or something that looks interesting or appealing. All of those things can occur, and all of those things can be common. And so it's important, I think, for care partners to understand that they're not alone in the experience of those things, that they can come up during the progression of the disease, and that there are ways to work through them.
So as Kelly mentioned, it is impossible to teach the person to stop. The inhibitions are gone. So telling the person what he or she is doing wrong or not nice, we hear that a lot. Stop that, that's not nice. Or we'll also hear, you're being inappropriate or things like that. So asking him or her to change the behavior will not fix it permanently and sometimes won't even stop it in the moment. So we need to be careful using those phrases, you're not being nice or that's inappropriate, because that's really not the way you want to work through these lack of inhibitions. Kelly, you want to speak more about this topic?
Yeah. The person may actually know that what he or she is saying and doing is wrong, but simply not be able to keep him or herself from doing it. And so there can be embarrassment, there can be shame afterward, and the person may even apologize profusely once the act or statement has been made. This isn't proof that they did the action intentionally or knowingly. A lot of people will take that as, oh, he apologizes afterwards, knows it's wrong, or she knows it's wrong. That's not necessarily the case. They may have the realization it's wrong, but it doesn't mean they were able to regulate the behavior in the first place. So realizing afterward that it was wrong or that it did somebody harm or had a negative outcome or an unintended outcome is something that frequently occurs, but it's not proof that the act was intentional. Reacting negatively to a person's lack of inhibition can actually worsen the situation. It reinforces the negative experience, it reinforces the shame, and it causes a rift. The other thing that it does is human beings naturally mirror the emotion that's experienced in the person that they're with. And so if you're feeling negative emotion or expressing negative emotion toward a highly intuitive or highly emotional person, chances are they're going to internalize that feeling and reflect it back at you. And then unfortunately, it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. And so it's very, very important to have that in your mind. Using negative words can actually cause the act to continue or even worsen.
So yes, Kelly, I think that it would be extremely helpful to just start with modifying the environment. As we spoke about, what we don't want to look at is, it really comes to shaming the person. That's not nice and things like that, because we know that that potentially is not going to help the client. But what we can do is look for any potential triggers for the negative communication or behavior and remove the potential triggers. So this may mean changing what the person is seeing. So when Kelly and I partner with professional care partners, we may say, well, what are we wearing to work? And so if we're wearing things that are a little bit more revealing or a little bit tight, we may encourage them to wear things that are covering the goods or maybe are a little less tight. So that way we're not seeing things that we may be misinterpreting. The other thing is hearing. We sometimes need to watch our language a little bit. If we're saying honey, sugar, sweetie pie, things like that, these may be misinterpreted as an invitation to engage things that we really didn't mean to engage in. Or being asked to do things at certain times. So we're going to share with you in a bit a client that we had that they were going to a park at a certain time, and it really wasn't a good time for him to go to a park because it was an invitation for all kinds of things happening at that time. So again, we want to look at the environment, and that can include timing, it can include what we're seeing, what we're hearing, the language we're using, and so forth. So often this is the only way to prevent the unwanted reaction of an individual living with dementia. Kelly, you want to share a little bit more?
Sure. So the other thing that can really be helpful is if you are upset by an interaction and you're feeling like you need to keep going, it's actually best sometimes just to say, I'm so sorry, and okay. You may not have done anything wrong, and we understand that, but there is something that triggered the person's feeling of negativity, and so apologizing diffuses the situation very, very quickly, and it can kind of put things back on an even keel. And then once you do that, you can reapproach when you feel more able to support the person or the situation without the difficult feelings. And sometimes that only takes a few minutes just to step away and kind of take a deep breath and calm yourself. A lot of times we'll hear people say, I know it's the person, it's the disease and not the person. And that is an accurate representation of some of what's going on here for sure. But sometimes you do need to step away to have that realization or to kind of take that comfort and then move back into a positive space with the individual. Again, I can't stress this enough, you want to avoid reacting. So shaming, becoming angry, or even correcting, kind of engaging in that argument where you're correcting and debating. It's not going to be productive. There is a golden rule in memory care, and that is that we don't argue because everybody loses the argument. So take that moment, step away if you're feeling like you need to. You deserve to have that time to yourself as well. It's a little self-care.
Sounds like my home, Kelly. I always lose the argument.
Everybody loses. This certainly applies in more than just memory care.
Absolutely.
A real life thing. All right, Nettie, do you want to talk? I know you mentioned earlier about asking people to do certain things at certain times of day, and sometimes we are setting folks up for failure by doing that, and we want to set them up for success. So can you give some strategies surrounding that?
Right. And the first thing we want to do is really think of it, we want to create a prepared experience. And so Kelly and I did have a situation where a family care partner and a professional care partner, they both came to us and said, we really need some help here because my loved one is going out. He's always loved to go out. He loves to walk. He likes to sit in the park, but he is really saying some inappropriate things. And also he's gone to touch at, inappropriate times to some other people that are strangers. So stranger danger here. This is not allowed, guys. So their initial reaction was to immediately isolate him. As we talked about, families, they're not equipped with how do we handle this, so they immediately isolate to protect, others involved as well as their loved one. And this was a younger man, he was in his 60s, so people are not suspecting that, there is some cognitive change going on. And so we have to be very careful, and certainly we have to think of safety involved for all parties. So what we said was, okay, well, let's just take this one step at a time. And so what we looked at is, what are the triggers? And so we identified what the triggers were, and there were some women that certainly triggered him. He identified beauty. And so that's a strength. Identifying beauty is a strength, because when Kelly and I assess situations, we always go from the side of strength. And so we have a younger man, and he's still able to identify beauty. And so we appreciated that. And then we also found that he has a strength of rhythm, and he has a strength and intellect of poetry, and he has a strength of music. And so what we identified is that he has many strengths. He also has a strength of still wanting to get out and, feel the sense of the fresh air and the sun on him, and he liked to be social and be around others. So there were all just different kinds of things going on that were so positive. And so we needed to kind of first work with the care partners on that not everything is negative. And so we had to really come from the negative side to the positive side. And Kelly, I think that was one of the most difficult opportunities that we had with the family, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think, when you're stuck in feeling that sense of loss and really focusing on the losses, it sometimes is hard to change your perspective and the way you frame the situation and looking at the positives. So I think that process can take a little time for people, but once they go through it, it's a really wonderful experience and a great shift in terms of quality of life for both care partners.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so once we identified all the strengths and we got everybody on board to see that, because people were seeing him as kind of a nasty man, right? I mean, those were the words that were being used, and that was certainly not the gentleman that we saw, in front of us, because we understood that there was damage to his frontal lobe, and there were triggers that were happening for him. So once we identified these triggers, what we were able to do is work with the care partners. And what was happening is, this is in New York City, and so there were certain times in the park that are our peaks here. And so there's all just crowds of people at certain times. So we identified those times where we actually wanted to not be in the park. We didn't say we shouldn't go to the park, but there were times where we shouldn't be there because it was so crowded. But then there's times where we should be in that park every time at this time. And then so we identified, and then we presented him with, what's a good time for you? And we gave him what we call a controlled choice question. Would you like to go to the park at 7:30, because he's an early riser, which we also identified, at 7:30 in the morning, or would you prefer to go? And then we gave him another time at 2 p.m. And so he said, I'd like to go at 7:30. Well, that's a home run right there, because there were very few people in the park. And then, remember I said we identified that he had rhythm and he enjoyed music, and he also enjoyed poetry. So we identified a poem that the care partner and the client could actually say on the way there, because we also needed to be careful that there might be some people that were on their way to work. But what we did is we had him so engaged in reminiscing and saying that poem out loud, and they were taking turns back and forth, that he wasn't even seeing the beauty of the women that we identified that he enjoyed earlier. So he was so engaged in his other strength of, I don't like where this is going. We also had the ability to look at timing with him and routine. And so we found out that he's an early riser, and he was ready to go around 7:30 in the morning. And then we also identified another time in the park that was a little bit less crowded, and that was around 2 p.m. People had already had their lunch in the park and they had gone. So what we did is we gave him a controlled choice, because it's always important to go back to your client or your loved one and offer them, hey, Well, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to go for a walk at 7:30 or at 2 p.m.? And then put it to them and allow them to make the choice. And so he would prefer at 7:30 in the morning. And then what we did is we went back to his strength of music and poetry, and we identified a poem that they would actually say to each other on the way to the park. It was a shorter poem, he had it memorized, and they would go back and forth. And then on the way there, he didn't even recognize that there were other people walking, past him or in front of him. And so he didn't even recognize the other beauty that was happening around him. He was so focused on his strength and so proud that he knew these poems. And then once they got to the park, they found a bench to sit on. And then what they did is they had poetry that they would read together. They had also identified songs that they liked to read together. So there was a focus when they were at the park. And then he's still able to enjoy the fresh air and the sunlight beaming on him. So we didn't have to isolate him. So again, removing the triggers. So what we did is we removed the crowds that were there. We gave him something to focus on because we looked at his strengths. And I think those were two important things. But in order to do that, we've got to get everybody on board to know that there's damage to the frontal lobe, yes, but he still had strengths. And we use those strengths to turn this around and create something positive and something beautiful. Kelly, do you want to add a couple more things?
Sure. So I just also wanted to kind of build on what you were saying, Nettie, and I think it's so important for care partners to know when you can build on those strengths and when you can turn it around and reframe, it avoids that taking away that happens so frequently. A lot of times, as we mentioned in the beginning, there's an isolation that occurs, and it's a gradual isolation. There are many times gradual losses over time, but those losses add up for you and for the person living with dementia, and they can really result in some resentment, they can result in conflict, and those are the types of things that lead to burnout. They lead to a lot of burnout, and they lead to that loss of connection. So we just want to emphasize that that's where we're coming from, and let's see if we can make this a little bit different, but not necessarily take it away. I do want to mention the use of appropriate humor. I think humor is one of the greatest coping mechanisms a human being can have, and Nettie certainly knows that I love to laugh, and I know she loves to laugh, and many of our partners love to laugh. But I do want to caution that when there is disinhibition, you really need to be calibrated to the mood of the person that you are laughing, hopefully, with. And my golden rule is if the person's not laughing, you shouldn't be laughing. If you are laughing and they're not, they may perceive it that you're laughing at them, and that can really lead to some escalations. Nettie already mentioned being mindful of language like honey, sugar, and sweetie. Those certainly can convey the wrong message from time to time. And the last thing I did want to highlight on this slide as an intervention, and it's something that we've used quite frequently, and many care partners don't know about them or don't have experience using them. They can be extremely helpful, are the cards that are up on the slide. And we have our own version of these cards. I know, I think allstore.com sells a version. There are many different versions out there. We will make our version available to you for download. If you are interested in downloading them, we'll have them posted to our website on our homepage. So you can look for the download on www.inspiredmemorycare.com. And here's what they say, and just forgive me for reading. They say, hello, I'm currently accompanying a person who has cognitive change and wants to stay active in the community. Would you kindly support us? Here's how. It may take a bit longer to make choices. Please allow us some extra time. Please be yourself and feel free to say hi. If I seem confused, please be patient. And please don't mention my cognitive change. And then on the back, it says, thank you for your support. Having access to stores, restaurants, and resources that welcome us in the community makes a big difference in our daily lives. And we have had a number of care partners approach us and say to us, thank you so much. These make it so so much less pressure to be out and about in public. I know there was one care partner in general who, in particular, who the woman that he was working with was getting into some confrontations on the street. And one confrontation what happened to be with some traffic officers, and it made him extremely nervous that the traffic officers may not know that she had cognitive change and that they may have escalated the situation. And that's a very real scenario. And I have to give him kudos, because she wanted to get out, and she's always been a very social person, had a lot of community involvement, and that's an important part of quality of life. So he made it happen, and the cards just made it a little bit easier on him. I did have another lady, and her particular care partner was helping herself to some nail polishes when they would go to the drugstore, and she would never open them, but the care partner would have to kind of take them back to the drugstore. And when she was able to kind of share the card with the proprietor of the drugstore, it became a much smoother process, and there was some clarity surrounding it. So obviously, you know, you want to be careful not to divulge a diagnosis, and to respect a person's privacy. But if it is the thing that will empower him or her to stay active and involved in the community, by all means, you know, this is a tool that can be used with good success.
So again, to connect with us, to learn more about the 80th Street residents, visit their website. Feel free to connect with them, join them for a virtual tour, ask them any questions. We certainly have enjoyed our collaboration with them. We have a training, education, and resource center, and that's what brings these Care Partner Q&A Mondays at 3 p.m. to you guys. So please feel free to reach out to them if you have further questions. If you have questions about inspired memory care, please visit our website. And certainly if you would like the cards that Kelly mentioned previously, you can download them off of our website. If you would like any of our on-demand webinars, they are available also on our website. We have various topics that are available. We also have a subscription activity program that you can find more information about. And we also have a certified Dementia Connections Facilitator program that you can find information about. So thank you for joining us this afternoon for Care Partners Q&A Mondays at 3 p.m. Next Monday, we will not be here as it is Labor Day. We wish you all a very safe and enjoyable holiday. We will be back the following Monday, September 14th. The topic we will be chatting about is when your loved one says, "I want to go home." What do you do? How do you handle it? So if you're interested in that topic, please join us. Again, that's Monday, September 14th. Until then, stay inspired.
Bye, everybody.